Super happy to be here in Tallinn. This is my second time at Latitude 59. It's an amazing week to come over to Tallinn. I'm also super happy to be joined here today by this great panel. But just to start off, we got a very quick brief here about what the AI Act is about. I hope you guys are all as excited that I am about talking more about regulation, because we heard from the previous panel that this is a hot topic, right? I myself have a background in law, so I love discussing these questions, but even more interesting when we bring AI into it. So as we heard, after a long period of negotiations, EU will be the first area in the world to have a comprehensive regulation on AI. The main purpose of the AI Act is really to establish harmonized rules on responsible or provide a reliable AI and safe use of AI. The regulation prohibits certain uses of AI and also has specific requirements on AI systems classified as high risk. And these could, for example, entail biometrics, critical infrastructure, or administration of justice and democratic processes. There are also obligations for operators of high-risk AI and rules for harmonizing on transparency and disclosure of requirements for certain AI systems. And we heard this might be coming with some challenges for the AI startups, any startup basically, and then also for the public sector. So this is part of what we will focus on here in the panel today. But let's just kick it off to get a little bit of a background from you. So why don't we start with Linda and the organization that you represent, the ESNA, Europe Startup National Alliance. Please, what's your background? How do you come into this, and what's the role of ESNA?
Sure. First of all, it's nice to be here. So I'm Linda Capusa. I'm the operations director of ESNA, and ESNA is short for Europe Startup Nations Alliance. It's an alliance that has been created through a political declaration signed by 27 European governments. And in the declaration itself, there is 8 overarching categories. We call them standards. So 8 standards that we look at, we measure, and we help to improve the national policies to raise the startup ecosystem in Europe. So there's been a lot of conversation for a while now that the startup ecosystem in Europe, unfortunately, is behind some other geographical regions. So ESNA is specifically created with the mission to help the national policies to be more harmonized, to level up with one country to another, so the whole Europe can be a better place for a startup.
Very good, thank you so much. And let's go to Alberto-Giovanni Busetto. Please, a bit of your background, please.
Yeah, myself, I was a tenure-track assistant professor of artificial intelligence at the University of California in Santa Barbara. Almost 2 decades of experience in building and designing AI systems since before it was cool. And I was the first group head of data and AI at Merck Healthcare, the pharmaceutical and science and technology company, and also at the Adecco Group, by far one of the largest companies in employment and HR. I'm also a member of the Global Future Councils of the World Economic Forum, focusing on data equity. And I'm the Chief AI Officer of Health AI, the global agency for responsible AI in health.
Thank you so much. And Kristel, government representative, can you tell us a bit about your role at the moment and your background?
Okay, so yes, I have a strong background in EdTech. So I used to be in education and dealing with computer-based exams and foreign language assessment. But during the past few years, I've moved on to AI. When AI exploded, I changed jobs, and I worked for the IT ministry. But now I'm in the government office, advising the Secretary of State and also the Prime Minister on matters of AI. And also, during the past few years, I've had the opportunity to work together with the Estonian public sector organizations, also private sector companies, universities, so I can see what the different people are worried about, and when it comes to the AI Act, how different parties see it and what they are concerned about.
Thank you so much. That gives us a good idea about the different angles that you can take on the conversation. So thank you so much. And I just want to remind you, please feel free to send in some questions so we can have an interactive discussion. I'll make sure to bring in some of your questions into the discussion. But so we know it might come with a bit of challenges when such a large regulation is coming into force. The AI Act will most likely be in place very soon and already start to have some impact this year or at the end of the year, especially with the higher risk AI tools, for example. But so, Linda, if we can start with you and the impact that you see on startups specifically, and if we can also look into how can they prepare. I mean, it's not too late, right? They're actually kind of early on. First, if you start with the impact on startups, please.
Sure, and I think when we talk about impact, we need to remember the aim of the AI Act.
Yeah.
So it is to safeguard the European citizen rights, it is to create a fair competition, and it is to also fight the disinformation that unfortunately a lot of times is associated with the AI. And another thing to remember is that this is, as you, Eva, you said in your opening, that this is the first in the world overarching AI regulation. So it will serve as a benchmark, but there will be definitely some learnings that we will do along the way. And for startups, as for any companies, the one place to be on the lookout is the regulatory sandboxes. So within the AI Act, there is a provision to support innovation and to do so through the regulatory sandboxes. And what that means is that there is a safe place for the innovator, startup, or any company to test their innovation together with the regulator, meaning that both sides can learn. For the startup, it means you have a place where you can test your product, your solution, in a safe manner without being penalized if something goes wrong. Thus, you could increase the speed to market and essentially, end of the day, also have a better chance of getting faster the funding you need. On the regulator side, the benefits are that you can learn from real-life applications. So it's a law that then is to see how it really fits with real products that are being developed. And one of the first AI regulatory sandbox that we see in Europe is created now in Spain. So they're exactly doing that. They're bringing together companies, regulators, to focus on the regulatory sandbox system and to test it out. And essentially, end of the day, that is at least expected to create a go-to guide of what really startups and the rest of the companies would need to take into account, as well as where regulators or where the AI Act actually needs to be stretched. As you said, it's going to be enforced in 2 years fully. So right now, it's still placed to play around and see what really works and what doesn't.
Thank you so much. And I've heard from other discussions in this that, for example, mapping or doing your own categorizations, for example, would be a good start for startups. That would be mapping, for example, your own risk. Yeah. And what about the risk approach that is needed here? Is this something that startups is normally used to? Because this is really what the AI Act implements, a risk-based approach.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up. So I think for startups and for, matter of fact, for any company operating with an AI, you need to start looking how your solution falls into the risk-based assessment that the AI Act is really set for. So there's different levels of risk associated with potential to cause harm. So if you are creating a solution with an AI that has limited risk assessment within the AI Act, you will have also limited obligations to follow, mostly linked to transparency of what you are developing. If you are falling into no risk assessment, then you will have no extra obligations. So I mean, that's step one, to really understand where your solution falls. And step two is go and look out for those regulatory sandboxes. They exist. I know there's one of the best in class also practices we are observing in Estonia. And I'm not saying that just because we're here today, but that's really the fact. So there are a lot of countries out there doing great things in that sphere. So step one, understand where your solution falls. Step two, be on a lookout for regulatory sandboxes.
Very good, thank you so much. And we will dig a bit deeper into the sandboxes shortly, but first I just want to go to you, Kristel, and see the impact on the public side of the AI Act. If you can elaborate a little bit on what you see on that.
So in a way, I think it's not something completely new that like now suddenly you have to start thinking about all the risks and transparency and so on. We have actually been thinking about those things for years. And we have been experimenting quite a lot in Estonia, and we have tried using different AI support tools, so helping public sector organizations. Again, we've done a lot of AI projects just to actually be able to see what it means and what kind of risks there are and what kind of problems come up. So it's not something new. But I guess the thing with new things and something that is that you hear about for years and years, and you haven't seen the final version of it. You don't know exactly what it's going to be. So there are going to be horror stories about it, how it's going to stop everything, which is not true. So I guess Estonians are quite practical people, so they don't like long documents. They don't have time because we don't have that many people, so we need...
And this is a long document.
I know, it is a long document. So we have been thinking about actually again coming out with really practical solutions again. We don't want startups and public sector companies to go and read and analyze and interpret the long document. We would like to make it easier for them to actually understand what it means and so to say translate it into their language so that they would be able to understand. So really practical solutions like sandboxes will be very useful here.
And I know you mentioned, and you basically brought it up now too, but the AI tool sandbox, for example, that Estonia has, this mindset. Now the AI Act is not really in place yet. Is it possible to have these mechanisms in place before it actually comes into force? And the support that startups will be needed from the day one?
Yes, so that is
and
the
public
plan.
sector for that side, for that matter.
Yeah, so that has been the plan, and we have had like data panels in place, different brainstorming opportunities, or actually planning sessions and so on. But now we can actually dwell deeper into the AI Act and all the different regulatory aspects of using AI. And so we have been experimenting quite a lot, and we have a practical experience, so we know how it works. And I also think one of the things that I find quite important is also collaboration. So collaboration between the public sector, private sector, universities, in Estonia, but also with your international colleagues abroad, because there's no point trying to reinvent the wheel. You should go and talk to all the different colleagues abroad and see how they have solved the problem and what kind of tools they have come up with. So sharing best practices and not making the same mistakes again and again, learning from other countries' mistakes.
Thank you so much. And Alberto-Giovanni, before we continue on the collaboration topic, I also want to bring you in and see the impact that you see. You have also an investor perspective and an entrepreneur perspective with you. The impact that you see of the AI Act.
I would make the distinction between the act itself and its content. by contrast to the perception. I think a big risk is that even in terms of perception, and especially on the side of demand for innovation more than supply, because there is a relative abundance of supply of innovation, I would say, in Europe, and certainly there is no scarcity of talent. More on the demand side, the perception of risk might be, exaggerated in a way, and I think that is clearly something that could slow down innovation even more than the content itself. Then clearly, we are still at very early stages, so it will really depend on how it plays out, how these things are actually put into practice. I think the role of the sandboxes, that generally speaking I'm a very big fan of, is going to be critical. And I can foresee already 3 basic ingredients, in my opinion, that a functional sandbox cannot do without, especially in the area of AI, and even more so for generative AI, that is still, I think it's fair to say, not yet a mature, technology. That's also what makes it exciting, right? But I think, these 3 ingredients are at the very least openness and availability of data for benchmarking, for assessment, for experimentation. The second ingredient is platforms, both technological platforms as well as public-private, collaboration on the development and validation of technologies. And the third one is quite an emphasis on data and AI literacy. Of course, there is never enough education, but I think this is in particular important. I think schooling system and also higher education in particular, they will play a fundamental role. It's also clearly within the existing mandates of research centers and universities, public and private, to educate people clearly and to create the next the talent essentially for the region. This will be important also because clearly these technologies, they require, when it comes to regulation and also development, they require quite a significant background in many different areas. And so I think this is a fantastic opportunity to implement sandboxes that are really fulfilling all these different criteria, and perhaps even more, and to make it a fair playing field for innovators, and to also lower the barriers in perception and also in practice to make things valid, compliant, and responsible.
That sounds very good. So let's stay on the topic of sandboxes, because you've all mentioned it now. And as you say, this is part of the new regulation, something that is supposed to be implemented in the different countries. And I actually myself have some experience of being in the first use case for the Swedish Data Protection Authority when they started their pilot on a regulatory sandbox. That was for GDPR, but 2 healthcare providers that wanted to test federated learning, a technology on how to train AI in a decentralized way, meaning that you would share the model instead of sharing the data. And it was very interesting, a lot of learnings, but it also took quite a bit of time to come through just this one use case, about 6 months. But I also see very much the benefits from these sandboxes. And I know there is an initiative in Germany and our sister organization called Applied AI based in Munich, looking into if it's possible to have sandboxes established with specific topics in the different countries. So have one sandbox, for example, in Spain, let's say, focusing on one topic, let's say biometrics, and another one in Estonia, focusing on a different area of AI. This is one thought of how they could be instead of having general sandboxes all over the European countries. But please, how do you see that we could best benefit from the sandboxes and make them really efficient to boost the innovation and the startups? Any ideas? I mean, it's a guesswork still, right?
Yeah, sure. I really like the idea of having topic-specific sandboxes rather than, so it's one country will be testing one AI solution and then everyone can benefit. I really think that's the way to go about it. But a lot of times when we talk about harmonization or international collaboration, it goes really back to the national policies as well. So AI Act, yes, it's overarching for the AI, that's fine, but the national policies, if they are not at the same level, then it's really difficult to talk about fully easier to scale, one Europe, harmonization. It still needs to be at the same level. So for the example, ESNA, one of the missions for us is exactly to take those 8 standards that I talked about and share the best practices with the national policymakers. So not because to rank anyone, but to make sure that we can learn from one another and we can be at the same level. Then we can talk about harmonization, and then we can go into those kind of solutions. And one of the standards that we also monitor is innovation in regulation, which is exactly about sandboxes and other regulatory exemptions. And right now, or for the 2023, the data showed we are 35% only in Europe, in the countries that we are observing. So definitely there's room to grow there and room for improvement. So I think that's the best way forward, to keep sharing the best practices. Kristel, you mentioned that as well. So I think that's what also the national policy makers are looking for.
And Alberto, if I may ask you kind of the same question here, and with your perspective from working with different kind of global organizations, how can this collaboration support the setups of the sandboxes?
I think a significant limiting factor today for the scalability of technology startups, perhaps also more generally for businesses in Europe, is fragmentation. Today, to my knowledge, there are at least 100 sandboxes. This is, of course, nice because it demonstrates that there is a spirit of initiative and clearly kind of global efforts at all levels to implement and offer sandboxes for innovation, which is great. On the other hand, as you can imagine, the cost of setting up and running a business has a lower bound that is determined by the underlying complexity, right, of the businesses and regions in which it operates. So by increasing the potential complexity and fragmentation, we are also increasing, I would say, the barrier to innovation. And this is an important obstacle that we should surmount. How to do it? I think collaboration and harmonization are very important things. As a techie myself, I can even see the opportunity for sandboxes as well as regions to not only collaborate in terms of the setup of those sandboxes, but even on the underlying technology platforms that in some cases could even automate or semi-automate some aspects of verification, compliance, and regulatory kind of aspects. I think this is the greatest opportunity, that of even making streamlining, if you will, and harmonizing the sandboxes, even by using technology. And I think AI in particular really lends itself not only to innovation in general, but also to innovation in regulatory compliance and verification.
Very good. And Kristel,
yeah, so I hope using AI to be compliant with all the AI Act rules, I hope it's not banned. So like solving the problem using AI would be a clever idea, I think. But yeah, I guess all I can do is just agree with you, because I agree with everything, and there's not much to add here.
I want to bring in one of the questions from the audience here, and we are now stating that, of course, EU is having one of the first legislations, but there is around the world a lot of talk about responsible AI, even if some other governments haven't really moved. So both from the public and private side, it's anyways happening a lot of discussions and thoughts on how to implement responsible AI, and how can we here in Europe kind of maintain the discussion of responsible AI at the same time as we look at what the AI Act is going to mean. And as you said, it's going to take a few years at least before we have some case law on different cases having use cases from the sandboxes come out. how can we best kind of move forward, support innovation while still looking at the responsibilities and the regulation coming into place? Anybody who's the first taker?
I will have to go back again to the regulatory sandboxes. That's clearly one of the tools that is there to exactly do that, to test innovation, allow the innovation to happen, but also make sure that the regulation actually makes sense. So, and with AI Act, yes, it's still new, so no one really knows exactly how it's going to play out. AI is so new and it's developing so fast, so that's why we need that room to allow the innovation to be tested with the regulation. So I think that's where the private-public sector need to be really collaborative and be fair. It's like, it's both things are new, so let's test it out and let's see what actually makes sense in the end.
Anybody who wants to add to that?
I think a vision for a desirable future is a future in which good businesses are solving real problems, and they are, of course, making a profit because they are solving such real problems. I think it's an opportunity now for businesses to take responsibility quite seriously. You see that very often in the various, surveys for large prospective, clients, right, of technology providers, that they expect, technology providers and also innovators in general to be responsible to begin with. Consumers, I would imagine, especially if they are educated, I choose to believe, and I hope that's indeed the case, that they would prefer responsible AI solutions. I think good sandboxes that allow regulators to learn and businesses to learn and also to have that awareness can be a fantastic platform to really further develop good business. And good business in that sense is certainly a business that is doing AI in a responsible way.
And if you want to also still elaborate on how can we really make this into a competitive advantage for our companies here in Europe? I mean, it must be something really good possible coming out of it from having at least some set rules instead of everybody shaping their own policies for responsible AI.
I guess for people, when you know that certain rules are followed, it builds more trust, and people will actually know. It's the same like with, I don't know, airplanes or air traffic. In the past, like you wouldn't want to get on a plane if you knew that there were no rules there and nobody has to service the planes and there's no one taking care of all the risks. So I think it's the same with AI. So as long as it's not too much paperwork, as long as we manage to keep the compliance costs as little as possible or down, I guess, so we have to make sure we find the right balance and we don't spend too much time and too much money on pointless things.
And maybe collaboration is a key word for that across the different countries. So we just have about a minute left, so a short answer to this one. But 10 years from now, how do you think we talk about the AI Act? Linda, if you start.
I think that at that point we will be looking back and saying, right, Europe did it right. They went there first, they went there hard, but look at them. They allowed innovation to happen, but they protected their citizens. That's what I hope will happen in 10 years.
Alberto-Giovanni?
Yeah, to finish on a positive note, I hope that when, in hindsight, we'll think about, like upcoming and existing regulations on AI, that it has been a learning experience, that regulators learned, the public sector learned, businesses, they've also been in their learning journey. And maybe the three keywords for a desirable future then are collaboration, as we have said, also transparency in the data, transparency in the algorithms and in the use cases, and also in the evaluation. And then the third one is fairness. Fairness also in the eligibility criteria to be part of those sandboxes, and fairness also in the outcomes.
Very good. And Kristel, very short and sweet.
I think we will be flying those AI planes because we know that all the regulations are in place and we don't question whether they are or not. So I think it's going to be okay. But I'm sure the AI Act will look completely different and the rules will be different 10 years from now.
So hopefully we have some really trustable AI at the time helping us with these questions. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences. And now I think we all look forward to a coffee break.